Hello, game theorists. So I just finished playing the North Korea game in class. So before I go into the analysis, I'd like to explain how this captures the standoff between the US and North Korea. So both sides want the other one to back down. Like we want them to abandon their nuclear program. They want to keep developing more and more advanced missiles and stuff like that. So in order to try to get the other side to back down, we have these escalations. So we might try to have like some military exercise with South Korea right on their border. And they come back by having a big military exercise with their military right on the border as well to show us that they're tough, they're serious, don't hurt us, don't harm us. And then we could do another military exercise. They might try capturing some civilian ship that's near their waters, other provocations like that. Usually these provocations is designed to signal that we're serious, you don't want to fight with us. This will be nasty if it goes to war. We are willing to fight. The drawback, though, is each provocation also increases the chance that a war could break out accidentally. So if we decide we're going to have some big military exercise right on their border, then what if a stray bullet from the exercise hits some North Korea border guard? Then you could have an actual war. Or if you have your airplanes flying close to their airspace to demonstrate that you could strike them whenever you want to, if your airplane actually does get into their airspace and they shoot it down, you could get an actual war. So each provocation is designed to show that you're tough, you're not going to back down, and that could get the other side to give up. Each provocation could also, though, increase the chance of a nuclear war breaking out. That's how a game is designed. If you pick a higher number, you might outbid the other side, effectively get them to back down. If you're both picking high numbers, though, there's a pretty good chance that you lose 10,000, nuclear war breaks out. So I did the randomization for you guys with your numbers you picked. Fortunately, there are no nuclear wars breaking out in class, but you can see how it could easily happen in this situation. So another way I think about this game is that it's effectively a continuous version of the chicken game. So we call it, the chicken game is where you drive your cars toward each other, and the chicken, the cowardly one, is the one who swerves first. The one who's brave keeps going straight, and they get all the glory. So you try to show you're tough by saying you're going to drive straight no matter what. Kind of like some escalation, some military exercise in a North Korea game, trying to show you're tough, you mean business. So instead of driving straight or swerving, your options are picking a high number or picking a low number. Picking a low number is cautious, like swerving in the chicken game indicates a more cautious approach. Driving straight in the chicken game is a riskier approach, but one that can bring glory and victory. Just like picking a high number in a North Korea game could bring you glory and victory, though at a great risk. So that's the intuition behind the game and how it captures the situation there. Now let's go do some analysis. So we have two players, I'll say Team 1 and Team 2. I'll say Team 1's picking number N1, and Team 2 picks number N2. So Team 1's payoff is pi 1. So if they pick a number that's bigger than the other team, so if I pick 50 and you pick 40, then I get the $100. However, there's also this risk of a nuclear war. So the lower number, in this case N2, was the percent chance of a nuclear war. So how do we model that? Well, we lose 10,000 if a war breaks out. I should have made more space. And I weight that outcome by its probability. How likely is it that a nuclear war happens? So a lower number is N2 here. So N2, to put into probabilities, is a percent right now. We have to divide by 100. So the lower number is, let's go back to my example. If I pick 50 and you pick 40, I get the $100. The lower number, 40, is the percent chance that we get a nuclear war. So 40% chance of nuclear war, probability 40 over 100, which is 0.4. On the other hand, if we pick the lower number, if N1 is less than N2, in that case, they're going to get the 100 and we get 0, but we still face the risk of a nuclear war. So we could lose 10,000 and the probability of that happening is going to be the lower of the two numbers. In this case, we picked the lower number. So like we picked 20 and they picked 45. So because we picked 20 and 20 is the lower number, it's a 20% chance of a nuclear war. So 20 over 100. To be complete, the game description should have provided what happens if there's a tie. So I'll just add that. Let's say there's a tie, then we divide the 100 equally, so we get 50. But we still face that risk of a nuclear war. So you could lose 10,000 with probability N1 over 100. Now the tie doesn't matter if it's N1 or N2 because they're equal, so I just picked N1, doesn't matter. So those are the payoffs. We can simplify a bit and do some cancellation. So for cancellation, these zeros cancel out, and these ones also cancel out, and those cancel out. So here's what you get. Pi 1 is going to be 100 minus 102 if N1's higher, if N1 is lower, then it's just going to be minus 101. And if they're equal, it'll be this. 50 minus 100 and 1. So those are our payoffs. By symmetry, it's something very similar for Team 2's payoffs. So where do we go from here? Well, I'll start by looking at a couple of possibilities you may have considered before I show you what the Nash equilibria are. So what if both teams pick 0? Is that a Nash equilibrium? So go ahead and pause the video here and think about that before you press play. Is that a Nash equilibrium or is it not a Nash equilibrium? So pause until you think you have the answer. Press play to find out if you're right. So it turns out that this is not a Nash equilibrium. So remember, a Nash equilibrium means that no player can get a higher payoff by deviating. So we both pick 0. That means we're going to tie over here, and we're getting a payoff of 50. But if I switch to playing anything above 0, I pick, say, 7, anything positive, then I get the $100 for myself at 0 risk. So remember, the probability of a nuclear war is the lower of the two numbers. So if they're picking 0 and I'm picking 7, I get the 100, and the probability of a nuclear war is 0. So I'm getting $100 with total safety. So if one player can switch strategies and get a higher payoff, it's not a Nash equilibrium. So you rule out that case. Both teams picking 0, not an equilibrium. All right, so what about if both teams pick 100? Is that a Nash equilibrium, or is that not a Nash equilibrium? Go ahead and pause the video here and think about that for a moment. All right, I'll assume you've given this some thought. This is also not a Nash equilibrium. So if both teams pick 100, there is a tie, so you split the $100 equally. The probability of a nuclear war is the smaller of the two numbers, which is 100%. So you get nuclear war with certainty. So you get the 50, but small consolation because you lose 10,000 due to the nuclear war. So you're both getting, I guess, minus 9,000, minus 9,950. But if you switch strategies and pick 0 instead, what's your payoff? It's going to be 0. So if you're picking 0 and they're picking 100, they get the $100. The probability of a nuclear war is the smaller number, in this case 0, so that means there's definitely not going to be a nuclear war. So you don't win the $100, but you don't get a nuclear war. You get a payoff of 0. That's better than this scenario. So you can switch strategies and get yourself a higher payoff. So it turns out there are two sets of Nash equilibria in pure strategies. There might also be a mixed strategy Nash equilibrium. I already tried to verify it once, but the math got extremely complex, so let's just not go there. So one Nash equilibrium is that team 1 is going to be greater than or equal to 1, and team 2 picks 0. So why does that work? Let's say team 1 is picking 30. So that means that Team 1 gets $100. And there's no risk of nuclear war. Risk of nuclear war is the smaller of the two numbers, which is 0 in this case, so 0%. Now, to show the Nash equilibrium, you gotta show that neither side can benefit by switching strategies. So Team 1 does not want to switch. That's because they're already getting $100 with certainty. You can't possibly do any better than that in this game. Now Team 2 also does not want to switch. So they decide, I'm going to pick 40 to outbid them. That's going to be more risk than it's worth. So what would their expected payoff be? Well, if you're outbidding the other side, but they're picking 30, your expected payoff is 100 minus 3,000. 30 times 100 is 3,000. So 100 minus 3,000 in expected value would be minus 2,900. So they could outbid Team 1 and win, but it's not worth the risk. A 30% chance of a nuclear war is just too big of a risk to run. So Team 2 also does not want to switch. Now this game is symmetric, so there's another Nash equilibrium that's similar. For the same reasons, you could have N1 picking 0, and N2 could be anything greater than or equal to 1. And this fits in with what I was saying earlier about this being a continuous version of the chicken game. So playing 0 in this game is a very safe strategy. It's like swerving in a chicken game in order to avoid collision. Picking something large is a risky strategy, which helps you win, but also involves some possible car crash, or in this case, a possible nuclear war. So there's one Nash equilibrium where one player plays the risky strategy and the other side backs down, and the other Nash equilibrium is where it's reversed. Just like in a chicken game where the Nash equilibria are one player goes straight, the other player swerves, and the other one is reversed. And again, there might be a mixed strategy Nash equilibrium there, but the math just got way too complicated for a senior level class. So that's the North Korea game. I also thought a bit about some other ways to model the conflict between the US and North Korea. And it does give us some insights into US policy. So one question I've been wondering about was, why does the US have troops stationed in South Korea? So why I was puzzled was because any war that breaks out is not going to be fought with guns. It's going to be fought with missiles and bombs, and the troops there are basically just targets for North Korean weapons. You're not going to shoot down a nuclear weapon. It doesn't work that way. So it might seem at first that the US is just putting troops in harm's way, and it doesn't make a lot of sense at first glance to have troops stationed in South Korea. If we're going to try to protect them, we should do that with missiles, not with troops who are, again, basically as targets. However, with game theory and C, there actually is some logic to what we're doing. And this is not just about the Korean conflict, it also generates some insights for game theory in general. So a model is a very simple sequential game. North Korea can choose peace, or they can invade South Korea. They pick peace and the game just ends and nothing changes. If they attack, well, you know they have a really powerful military and South Korea be outmatched. The main question is, does the US want to get involved, or do you want to just let South Korea fall? So let's put the payouts with North Korea's on top. So what happens there? Well, let's see, if North Korea conquers South Korea successfully without any resistance from the US, they're going to get a lot of economic resources. That's going to help out their struggling economy tremendously. Let's say it's a payoff of positive 10. Here in the US, we are saddened that South Korea fell, but we didn't lose any troops because we withdrew. So we'll call that a minus 10 for the US. If the US responds by attacking North Korea, we get this big, probably nuclear war. That's going to be really bad for both of us. Let's call it minus 1,000. So it's a sequential game. Let's use rollback. So US payoffs from the bottom, and US is moving last here. So we pick peace, we get minus 10. If we attack, we get minus 1,000, so peace sounds better. If North Korea then knows that the US will not retaliate, then they can attack because they know this will be the outcome, and they'll get a payoff of positive 10. That beats getting 0. So things look rather bleak for South Korea if the US withdrew its troops. Possible objection, but isn't it even worse if we put our troops in harm's way and basically, again, just make them targets? Wouldn't that be even more awful than this outcome? Paradoxically, the answer is no. Here's why. So the game is similar. We still have North Korea moving first, and they can choose peace, or they can attack. South Korea, again, payoffs are 0-0 if they pick peace. The US can attack in retaliation. I get this nasty war. Payoffs are minus 1,000 each. Or we can pick peace. And North Korea conquers South Korea. They get positive 10 payoff. But here's the difference. If we have troops in South Korea, then even if we don't retaliate, we still lose a lot of lives. I'm not quite sure how many troops we have over there. I think it's somewhere in the tens of thousands. So even if we do nothing, if we don't retaliate, we're still losing tens of thousands of Americans. And on top of that, we also are saddened to see South Korea fall. We don't want them to fall. They're an ally of us, and we like promoting freedom around the world. So maybe that's even worse. Maybe it's a payoff of minus 1,001. So either way, America loses a lot of troops, whether we attack, whether we don't, because we already have troops over there. In this case, though, we also see South Korea fall. We don't like that. If we fight, then maybe we beat back the attackers. So what's the outcome in this rollback? In this game, I should say. So US payoffs from the bottom. So it's better to get minus 1,000 than minus 1,001. So now we can say we will attack. North Korea, observing this, says, I'd rather pick peace and get 0 rather than minus 1,000. And there's the big paradox. So all I did was we had the US lower its own payoff. And the US, by lowering its own payoff, actually achieved a better outcome. How is that? We made this outcome so undesirable that now we can credibly threaten to retaliate against North Korea. Now the calculation is, we're losing a lot of lives anyways, we might as well fight you guys back. So now a threat to retaliate is credible, and North Korea, spooked by that, picks peace. So that is a paradox in game theory where sometimes you can get a better outcome by lowering your own payoff. This kind of reasoning also explains the communications between the US and North Korea and the escalation we had earlier. So both sides are trying to sound tough. They're trying to sound like we really would go to war if you attack us, so you had better not attack us. So you had things like Trump calling Kim Jong-un Rocket Man and stuff like that, and you had North Korea making their own verbal attacks on the U.S. and their own escalations by doing things like holding military exercises and all that. It all fits in the context of game theory where you're trying to get the other side to back down in a version of the chicken game. But this is a good idea to keep in mind where paradoxically lowering one of your own payoffs can actually improve your outcome. And there is some rationale for the U.S. keeping troops in South Korea. It shows them that we're serious about their security and we will definitely fight back if the North Koreans try anything. So that wraps up our episode on the North Korean game. We'll look more at continuous strategy games in the rest of Chapter 5.